All right, so what I want to talk with you now is about screen time versus nature time. And we all know that our kids spend a lot more time on screens than they do doing much of anything else, right? More often than eating. Some kids are spending more time on screens, or at least the equivalent amount of time on screens as they spend in school. And so really this is just kind of give you an idea of what those numbers look like, as well as what the numbers look like for outdoor time. So we're going to start with screen time up here at the top. And in terms of American kids, age 8 to 18, the average child spends about 4 hours a day on television alone. So this is where it gets interesting, because we're going to start looking and seeing how many different media they're using throughout the day. And these numbers that we, the total numbers that we use could be overlapping of other numbers. I'll explain that in a second. So with the computer, they're spending at least an hour on the computer every single day. And to be honest, this is not homework related, and it could potentially be a lot more. These stats are just a little bit older, and so there's a good chance that computer time now is more than what it was when this was done. Electronic games, 50 minutes a day, and that obviously is probably up to over an hour, as popular as games are now. And then music, this is not really surprising. You're looking about an hour and 45 minutes for kids listening to music each day. So for this age group, the average amount of screen time is about 7 to 12 hours a day. Now, that does not mean that they are spending a total of 7 to 12 hours. It means that they can be doing what's called, multitasking, multimedia tasking, where they are listening to TV, watching quote-unquote TV, looking on their computer, and maybe playing an electronic game on their phone, right? So they're doing 3 different things at once. So each of these times adds up to 4 or 5, we'll say about 6 hours of their total time, even though they're really spending maybe 4 hours or whatever it is. Does that make sense? So the 7 to 12 hour time period could be multiple media usage added up into one long time. So maybe their actual screen time is 4 hours, but when it adds all up together, it comes out to 7. So 7 to 12 hours for 8 to 18-year-olds in the United States. All right, so let's compare that to our outdoor time. The average American child from 6 to 17 years old spends 4 to 7 minutes outside a day. So compare that, 7 minutes to 7 hours of media. Huge, huge discrepancy, right? Now this is another interesting one. So when we talk about, getting outdoor time at places like schools and daycares, we know that schools keep cutting back recess time very, very frequently. Like some kids are only having maybe 15 to 30 minutes, if they're having any recess at all, a day. So daycares, they try to get their kids outside too. Most policies that I've seen are about 60 minutes a day. They try and get their kids out for at least an hour. Even though that's their goal, one study actually looked at this. Even though their goal was an hour a day, they were actually getting their kids outside for 30 minutes a day. And another thing that they looked at was in this study was how often do kids play vigorously? Like how often are they really running and doing what kids should do, right? Being really active. And it came out to, I want to say 48 minutes a day. And so kids are not moving. They are incredibly sedentary. That's why we're having issues with obesity and all these other types of diseases that typically don't show up until middle to late life, and they're actually happening in our children. And it's because they're not getting outside and they're not moving, right? At least that's part of it. Diet obviously plays a part. There's quite a few other things. So a different study looked at the number of preschoolers that go outside every day, and you're looking at about 51%. So if you think about it, 51% of preschoolers are going outside every day. They might only be spending 4 to 7 minutes outside playing every day. So even though they're going outside, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're spending much quality time outside. And another study that looked at kids from around the world, 10 different countries actually, and it showed that 1 out of every 3 kids gets outside for less than 30 minutes a day. So the statistics for America look pretty bad, right? But this tells us that we're not the only ones, and this is a problem with probably developing countries worldwide. And then another thing that, a little piece of trivia that I found that I thought was fun, is that U.S. inmates get 2 hours a day of outdoor time. And when these inmates were interviewed and asked, you know, what would you do if you didn't have this outdoor time? They said that there would be a lot more anger, there would be a lot more aggression, there would be a lot more depression and unhappiness. And so their 2 hours was absolutely sacred. So let's talk a little bit about what the scientific research says in terms of taking, or at least controlling screens through setting rules for our family. So people who set rules that are no devices in the bedroom, which means that nothing is out, you have to take the chargers out, right, so the kids can't use them. They must ask permission to use their device. Homes that the TV is turned off if people aren't watching it. So in some homes, they have the TV turned on all the time. So this is one rule that you can set. If the TV is not being watched, it needs to be turned off. And then some families have no devices during dinner set as a rule. So that includes TVs and phones and everything else. And the stats show that for each one of these rules, families who have these rules, their children are spending 2 hours less on screens every single day than their American counterparts. And that's simply by setting, it doesn't have to be all 4 of them, simply by setting any one of these rules, their kids are watching 2 hours less of whatever screen that they're using. And then just to kind of encourage you guys, y'all already know this, right? This is nothing new. But in terms of media usage, if they're going to be using their phones and their screens and everything else, make it creative. Take them outside. Let them take photos, take videos, create a project, make it a community thing where they teach their grandparents or their neighbors about the local birds. So have them use technology in a really creative way. Number 2, teach etiquette. We don't want to have a bunch of kids that will not look up from their phone when they're being addressed, right? That's we don't want to go down that road. And then finally, there are apps that you can use for getting outside. iNaturalist is a great one. Nature Cat, which is the PBS show, is also a great one for young kids. And then you can download things like compass apps and apps that have local trails that you can hike on. So there are a lot of opportunities for using technology outside. You don't want to use it the entire time, but it's a great way to help kids transition from being on their screens to being outside. So if you guys have any questions about these stats, let me know. I have a blog post on them that gives you all of the references, so that way you know exactly where the information came from. And I hope you're having a good day. All right, bye.